Baptism. It's one of the most central practices in Christianity, but man, it can also be the source of so much confusion. Today, we're going to cut right through all that noise. We're going to use a really powerful analogy from the Old Testament that, believe it or not, sheds a ton of light on this whole topic. So, let's get into it. You see, at the very heart of almost every debate about baptism, it all boils down to this one question. Is it an act that actually saves you, or is it a sign of something else entirely? This one question has caused so much disagreement, but today, we're going to find some real answers. All right, here's our game plan. First, we'll dive into why baptism is such a puzzle in the first place. Then, we're going to uncover its deep connection to the ancient rite of circumcision. That's going to give us a simple, guiding rule to think with. From there, we'll nail down baptism's true meaning. And finally, we'll tackle the evidence from the New Testament.
Okay, so let's start with the puzzle itself. Baptism is so central to the faith, and yet, if you were to ask 10 different Christians what it means, you'd probably get 10 different answers, right? That kind of confusion is a big sign that we need a much clearer way to think about it, one that's really grounded in the text itself.
These are the questions that pop up over and over again. Does the water itself somehow save you? And if an adult already believes in Jesus, what's the point of getting baptized? Is something actually happening inside them spiritually in that moment? With so many churches teaching different things, it can feel totally overwhelming. And what's wild is that even adults who are making a public profession of their faith are often really unclear about what's theologically happening to them when they get baptized. So to solve this puzzle, we're going to do something that might seem a little counterintuitive. We're actually going to look backward to the Old Testament. You see, the real key to understanding baptism in the New Testament is hidden in its parallel, the rite of circumcision. And trust me, this connection is where it all starts to click.
Just look at this. When you put their purposes side by side, the parallels are absolutely striking. Both were about inclusion, about being brought into the community of faith. They gave a person access to God's truth. But here's the part that changes everything. Neither rite was ever meant to grant salvation, and neither one could magically create a spiritual change in a person's heart.
Okay, so now that we see that powerful parallel, we can actually build a single guiding principle from it. Think of it like a simple rule of thumb that acts as our compass, keeping our thinking straight and just cutting through all the fog surrounding baptism. And here it is from the theologian Dr. Michael Heiser. The rule is this: you shouldn't say about baptism what you cannot say about circumcision. It's a really simple test. If you hear a claim about baptism, just swap in the word circumcision. If it suddenly sounds theologically wrong, then that claim is probably off base. And this little rule is so incredibly helpful, even for churches that only baptize adults. It makes it crystal clear what isn't happening. You are not being saved by the water. But it also clarifies why you're doing it. You are formally and publicly joining the community of believers. So, with this guiding rule in our back pocket, we can finally start drawing some really clear lines around what baptism is and, just as importantly, what it isn't. So let's just be super direct here. Applying our rule, baptism is not an act that saves you. The Bible is completely clear that we can't earn saving grace through any ritual. And just like circumcision didn't automatically change an ancient Israelite's heart, baptism doesn't magically create some new spiritual desire inside of you. So if that's what it isn't, then what is it? Well, baptism is the formal act of inclusion into the community of believers. It's the front door to being surrounded by God's truth and God's people. And for someone who already believes, just like Abraham with circumcision, it serves as this powerful outward sign of the faith they already have on the inside. And this community thing is designed to do two really vital things for a believer. See, joining the family of God is just the beginning. That membership is meant to both foster your faith as it starts to grow and then sustain it with teaching and fellowship for the long haul. Okay, but this brings us to a really common and very fair objection. I know what you're thinking. People will point out that when you read the New Testament, the only examples you ever see are of adults, of believers, getting baptized. So, what do we do with that? The first step is to just acknowledge it. That observation is true. It's a fact. You won't find any clear, undeniable verse about an infant being baptized anywhere in the New Testament. So the observation itself is totally correct. The problem isn't the observation, it's the conclusion that people sometimes draw from. You see, the key here is all about context. So let's just walk through the logic. 1, we admit the fact. The New Testament only shows adults being baptized. 2, we ask why. Well, the reason is pretty simple. The church was brand new. The apostles were preaching to adults to literally kickstart the faith from scratch. 3, this is where we spot the logical fallacy. To assume that these examples forbid any other practice is what's called an argument from silence. And that leads to the real conclusion. The New Testament is describing a specific historical moment. It was never meant to be a complete, exhaustive rulebook on baptism for all time.
And this is really the logical linchpin of the whole thing. An argument from silence that fails in one direction also fails in the other. Just because the New Testament doesn't explicitly describe infant baptism doesn't mean it's forbidden. The absence of evidence isn't the evidence of prohibition. The text simply shows us the historical reality of how the church got started.
And that brings us to our final question for today. If baptism isn't some magical act of salvation, but instead a deeply meaningful act of inclusion into a community, well, how does that change things? How does shifting our focus like that alter the power and the purpose of this ancient practice, both for us as individuals and for the church today? You know, it's a perspective that really changes everything.